Hey, welcome back. It's RespectTheJeff here with another video about FIFA 20 career mode. And this time I'm going to be covering dynamic player potential, and I'm going to do this by running a quick experiment. Now the idea here is to transfer players with the same ratings and potentials into one team, and then I'm going to give some of these players a lot of playing time and keep others in the reserves, and we'll see what happens over a couple of seasons. So here's the players that I picked for the experiment. I covered strikers, fullbacks, and goalkeepers just to give a wide range of positions, and I picked players with potentials around 80, so there's room to grow if they're doing well, but if there's some kind of negative effect, that should be shown really clearly as well. So the fullbacks were all 70 rated, around 21 years old, and had a potential of 82. The three strikers all start out at 69, are 20 years old, and have potentials of 83. And I just picked two goalkeepers. They're both 22 years old, rated 70, and have a potential of 80. Now to make sure that the team performs well for those who are playing, I picked Birmingham City in the English Championship and just put all the players there. So I transferred them all in, I set the lineups with half the players in starting roles, half on the bench, and then for the strikers and fullbacks I included a third player, and the idea for them was to be able to sub in and out, get some appearances, and hopefully be somewhere in between the two other spots. So the simulation started off really well. Early on, the players started to grow a bit, and those who were starting more regularly definitely had higher changes to their overall. You can see Romero here has been leading the line. He scored a bunch of goals early on, and he's already up +3. And some of these players that have just been sitting in the reserves, like the left back Michalenko, he's even gone up by 1 and he hasn't featured once all season. But these were just early days, and things started to get really crazy when I simmed a little bit farther into the future. In Season 2, I ran into a ton of problems. I started getting mass messages from players asking to leave the club, and some were fair. Michalenko didn't really play at all, he was sitting in the reserves, so I think that's a fair ask from him. But then I started to get them from players like Riveros, who had played every single match of all 2 seasons that I had simmed. What started out as just an unlucky series of events seems like it might actually be a bug in the game. I got like 7 or 8 messages from different players all asking to leave at the same time. I even tried to recover an old save and start from scratch again there, and I started getting the same messages back at that point in time too. You can see here the squad morale is terrible, and I just don't know why. The team's in 3rd place. A lot of these players are playing almost every game, and they just don't seem happy with their playtime regardless. So I powered through anyways. I simmed through the rest of Season 2, but this really might have messed up the experiment because even the top players had terrible morale for the entire 2nd season. I really wanted to run this experiment for longer, but I think this is just going to be one of those bugs in the game that kind of ruins the save file, and I don't think we could take it any further. But all is not lost. Things didn't go perfectly, but I found some really interesting things when I crunched the numbers behind our player growth. And here are just the overall results so you can take a look. We'll start with the growth of the strikers here. You can see Romero was a starter for both seasons. I made sure he scored a lot of goals in the simulations and did well, and he had a +8 overall, rising to 77 total. Plaza still rose by 7, didn't feature quite as much, but did get a bit of game time. And Marquez, who sat in the reserves the entire time, still grew by +4 overall, which was interesting to see. Now taking it to the fullbacks, Riveros played every game, but like I said, this might be a bit tainted because he was really unhappy regardless due to that bug that we ran into, but he saw +6 overall, and Cannon and Michalenko, who didn't play a single minute in 2 seasons, still rose by +5. So not a whole lot of difference between the fullbacks, to be honest. And now getting to the 2 goalkeepers, Slobin played every single game, and Woodman sat in the reserves for the entirety of these 2 seasons, and there's only a +1 difference between the two, +5 and +4 respectively. Now this seems pretty shocking, and I really hope it wasn't down to the weird simulations in the game. But this doesn't tell the full story. Let's take a quick look at how this looks over time. So starting again with the strikers, you can see all of their overalls over the 2 seasons. I wrote down the numbers every 3 months and put them down on the timeline. So one really interesting thing about this graph is that Marquez, who didn't play, you can see him sort of tail off over time. For those first couple months, he was still rising a bit anyways, despite the fact that he wasn't getting minutes. But you can see he just stays at the same overall towards the end of the season, which is really interesting. And now getting to the fullbacks, you can see a lot of similarities between them regardless of minutes played. Michalenko just continued to rise, even though he didn't feature at all. and Riveros was consistently +1 above the rest. He did get a lot of minutes, but it's weird to see that Cannon and Michaelenko pretty much had the same raises total. There was just a little difference there where for 3 months he went up by 1 when Michaelenko didn't, but really similar. And for the goalkeepers, you can see there's not much to separate them at all, which is a little disheartening to be honest, because like I said, Woodman didn't play at all and still continued to rise. And again, I wish this could have gone a little bit better because I'd like to get some definitive answers on how this stuff works. Unfortunately, this was a little bit more of an experiment than like a hard answer in how the game works. And I would really love to see how this plays out over like 5 or 6 seasons instead of 2. But when it got to the point that all the players were asking to leave, there just wasn't anything I could do to keep this one going. So this is just a first pass at things. I think when I do a proper Road to Glory team, I can track players over time and maybe check in with some more accurate numbers on how players overall got affected. In the meantime, I thought you all might find this interesting though. But that brings us to the end of this video. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate all the support. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. It helps the channel out a lot, and I'll continue to put out new content you can stay up to date with. But until then, I'm RespectTheJeff, and I'll see you all next time.